Today I'm going to be talking about giving notice in a law firm. And this is actually a very serious topic. It's not what it appears to be on the surface, because I think a lot of people believe that once you are looking for a new job or, you find a new job, you can give notice and you don't really have to worry about the people that you're leaving behind. And something interesting happened to me, and I'll just tell you real briefly in terms of my career. One of the first firm that I ever worked at, when I gave notice, I gave it to one of my mentors, which was fine. But then another attorney in the office came by and basically asked me why I was giving notice. And I hadn't had a great relationship with him. It wasn't a bad relationship, but he was someone that it was, well, I don't know, scurrying around is a good word, with someone else that I knew, and I didn't like, and I had some issues, which was none of it was any of my business, but I was a little angry. And so when he asked me why I was leaving, I said something like, because I want to make more money. I want to go to a place where there's more prestige, and I want to go to a place with more opportunity. And that wasn't a nice thing to say. And it wasn't something I should have done. Of course, then in the future, he became the hiring partner of the firm for a while. When I made placements at the firm, it didn't pay me. He did eventually pay me, but he waited a long time to pay me. Then at one point, I actually wanted to go back to working there when I went to a second firm, and he also made it difficult. So the point is, everybody you give notice to and the way you behave when you leave a law firm is something that is going to stick with you for most of your career. And it's something that you should remember, because those people are going to be people that you're going to encounter again. Those same people may be working with you in a law firm again. You may get to where you're going to go next and want to go back. They may be that there's all sorts of, you'll encounter these people again. So yeah, the best way to leave a firm is typically in a very nice way, and in a way where you don't arouse any anger, and people are, when they remember you, they think very positively of you. And I had an instance just not too long ago where a girl who was working for me and as an attorney was having issues with some matters that we were working on, and because of the stress levels and stuff involved. And she gave notice. I was a little upset about it because she was in the middle of with depositions and some other things. And, but she was very nice about it. And even after that, she wrote a note to me saying how much she appreciated the opportunity. That actually ended up leaving a very good taste in my mouth. And then later on, I encountered her through other people I knew and so forth in this situation, that the way that she left ended up helping her. And I made sure to go out of my way to help her. So it's important when you're leaving any firm to understand that the way you behave is going to make a large difference in terms of what happens to you in the future. A lot of times when people are leaving firms, one of the biggest challenges is you have to tell the employer that you're leaving. And it is a big challenge. And one of the first things I would say to you is, if you're considering giving notice and you don't have another job, that's a very risky thing in the legal profession. It's very difficult to get another job if you give notice without a new position lined up. So you always want to make sure that anytime you give notice, you have a new position lined up, or you have something you want to do, because people will typically believe if you leave without a new job lined up, that you may have lost your job. So if you are upset in your firm, or something along those lines, and you feel like you're going to get fired, or you just want to give notice because you're really frustrated, you're much better off going all out to get a new job. It'll be much easier to get a new job before you do that. So a lot of times before giving notice, people are very nervous, and that's understandable. Someone may have hired you and given you a good opportunity. Someone may have taken a risk on you and brought you in when they had no business doing that. That can be, for many people, a very upsetting thing. So people do not like leaving many times when they've gotten a new position and they're afraid to give notice. They're just very nervous, or afraid people will get angry. And sometimes they do. I've had people that I took risk on give notice, and it was upsetting. I was very upset by that and didn't like it. So you need to be prepared for that. But at the same, if you're looking for a new position, you found a new position and you're ready to give notice, then you're obviously doing the right thing. You do need to give notice. As you are planning on leaving, you're obviously making a life-changing decision. You just need to be ready for that. And it's important for you to know what to do. So one of the first questions people have a lot of times is, who should they tell first? And typically the way to resign is to prepare a short letter of resignation and to deliver it to the person that you're working with the most. The attorneys tend to get letters of resignation a lot, especially when law firms are going through issues. Many times by the time you leave, they will know that you're going to leave. Typically, when an attorney is getting ready to leave, they will disengage to some extent. They'll start missing things that they normally would be at. They won't be as quick to respond with assignments and all that sort of thing. So you need to be you need to be prepared that people may actually understand you're going to leave before you do leave. Many times people will give notice to the wrong person. So typically an associate does not give notice to an associate. You would give notice to a partner. You can also sometimes, if it's a huge firm and you don't feel like you have any very close relationships, give notice to the HR department and let them know you're leaving. People will typically write a short letter, then they give it to whoever is that they're working with. People will write long letters and so forth and go into detail, and no one really reads those letters. So you have to remember that it just with what you say and your actions are really what people are most concerned about. Then you should just basically tell the person that you believe is in charge about it. And once you give notice to one person, typically news is going to travel very fast. That just let people know. When I was working in, a couple of law firms, people would give notice all the time, and because of that, and then they would make a big deal and they would circulate. And it was like people were circulating in the office all the time and going from one office to another. And I don't know that you need to make that big of a deal out of it. I think that the more low key you are about leaving, the less it's going to create problems. Certainly when you're going around talking to everyone about it, you can be making an issue out of it. And you're much better off not making an issue. When you make an issue, people often feel the need to take sides, or makes them feel bad about themselves. I had an issue I remember one of my friends when I was at a law firm, a girl was giving it, and she gave notice and did this thing where she circulated around to everyone and talked about how bad the firm was. And eventually I felt at this point, I was at my second law firm, wanted it to work out. And I said, this is depressing. All you're doing is talking about how bad this firm is. And I really don't want to believe that. And she said, you'll realize what's wrong with this place eventually and all that kind of thing. She was right, but forcing me to take sides and so forth wasn't pleasant. And and because of that, even though we were very good friends, and she was actually one of my neighbors where I lived, we're really friends after that. And so that was too bad. And so you want to basically leave a good taste in everyone's mouth. You want everyone to feel good, about you when you leave. And you don't want to say anything negative about the firm. You just want to say that this isn't the right opportunity for me. And you need to realize, and when you're giving notice, and law firms will often stay in business for, decades or more, 100+ years. And so it's not the law firm's going to suddenly change its business model or something because you're giving notice. You just want to make sure that you're leaving and on good terms, and realizing that everybody that you give notice to and tell about you giving notice are people that could either help you or hurt you in your career going forward. If you have a bad relationship with a senior associate, if you have a bad relationship with other associates, and when you give notice, you make it seem that you're showing them and you're going to a better place, or you're taking control of your life and so forth. But the only person that's making you feel good is yourself. You're making other people feel bad on your way out. And that's not a nice thing to do, because they will return the favor at some time in the future by making you feel bad if they can't, or badly. And the same thing with partners. If you're going out in a negative way, they're also going to do what they can to rub it in at you in the future. They will realize where you're coming from and so forth, and maybe even be on your side. But at the same time, they will maybe negative back to you at some point in the future. And then you will come across, especially even in a community like the size of New York or Los Angeles, you will run across the people that you gave notice to in the future in most cases. So you need to be very careful, and especially the way you give notice, and people will remember it for decades. So you just need to be very careful about how you do things. And if you don't really know what you're doing, you should always ask senior lawyers and other people for advice. And that goes for a lot of things when you're practicing law. It's always smart to ask people that know what they're doing. And if you ask them, they can definitely, people that have been in your situation before, they can help. And they'll often give you very good advice about what to do and explain to you what they would do in your situation and how they would recommend handling it and so forth. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that senior lawyers and other people that are senior and have been in your situation, they actually give it advice, and they like telling you how to do things. They can often be very helpful for you and explain the reasons to you explain to you how to approach things. So you should basically do that. And you don't want to, a lot of people will do things like they'll send emails to the entire firm or they'll, another thing. You just want to be very careful. And then in terms of everything else, there's a few things that I just want to make sure I emphasize. The first is if you want to make sure that your employer has a positive view of you when you're on your way out, just remember that person or that company or law firm has taken a risk on you by hiring you in the first place. And then sure, they had other choices. And you shouldn't be mad at them for that. They've paid you and supported you. They've allowed you to, do certain things and helped you. They'll be asked for references about you in the future, and they'll have the opportunity to say good things or bad things. The way you handle yourself, if you come across as a real class act at this point in time, it's going to help you, and you should make it not their fault. You should make it your fault and really not try to prove anything on the way out. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make. So typically you want to, the best people to approach are the people that you have the best rapport with and that are going to provide you, or you think, with the best references and so forth in the future that you'll be able to rely on in the future. You'd be very nice about it and explain to them the reasons why you're leaving and so forth, and tell them if you enjoyed working with them and praise them. Say they're the best attorney you've ever met or whatever, or no one's helped you more and so forth. That the reason you're leaving has nothing to do with that, but it's because of your unique situation or something else that's truthful. Make sure it comes across that way. And of course, people give notice and leave firms for all sorts of reasons. I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but if you approach it the right way, that person will be helpful. And in most cases, will be honored to provide you with references and so forth if the need ever arises. Another thing you can often do too is if you have had a bad relationship with that person, then that's probably not the person to give notice to. You may be excited about giving notice to someone if you've had a bad relationship with them, but I would typically want to give notice to the person that you've had the best relationship with. And law firms will, not often, but they can find reasons to withdraw offers. And so sometimes offers will be contingent about having good references. And if you don't have good references when they're checking them, that can hurt you. And you never know why that is. And even if it has no conditions, past employers will often, act as your future references. They will be asked about you. I remember I had an instance a while ago, years ago, where an attorney that I was representing was hired by a firm, and he'd been unemployed for a while. And it seemed very odd because he had very good background, very good qualifications. And then after he was hired and became known around the community that he was working at this very good firm, some people kind of offhandedly made remarks to partners in the firm that had hired him that this wasn't a good guy. He done things wrong in the past, and what are you doing? And the firm actually just let him go. And I was very surprised by that. Because people made bad remarks about him and had something to do with some behavior of his that they didn't like, and when he was out the door. So you have to be very careful. People will give you bad references if they don't like you, and they'll give you good references if they do. And even after you leave, it's important to remember that it's rare. Now, what I'm telling you about, I've made thousands of placements, and that is one of the only times anything like that's ever happened. But it's rare, but people can do you harm if you make them mad, especially on the way out. And people hold grudges, and especially when you make it about them and so forth. So most partners at established firms know people at other firms. And just keep in mind that even though it depends on kind of the firm you work at and the quality of firm, the best firms, by the way, will rarely say anything bad about someone when they leave. It tends to be firms that aren't the best, but sometimes they will. And if they say something negative, and there's almost in the legal profession a code of honor, and that code of honor seems to be even more pronounced at a lot of the bigger firms. I don't know why that is. And the smaller firms will not always follow that, but the larger firms for the most part do. I've had instances where people have left some of the most prestigious firms in the country under, bad circumstances, and those firms would never think if they say anything negative about that. And when I check their references, they have nothing but great things to say. The attorney themselves is, that doesn't make any sense, blah, 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 I did this, I did that. But that's kind of how it works. So you just need to be careful. But just remember that people talk among themselves. Attorneys have friends at other firms. People will communicate unflattering information about you, especially if you make them mad. But if you don't, then you're in good shape. So just resist the temptation at all costs to be rude on your way out, to do anything negative, to try to make people feel badly. Right, the need for them, it's just going to come back and hurt you. And I know I've said this a million different ways, but myself. I made that mistake and I wasn't as nice as I should have been to a very powerful partner. He was able to let me know he was unpleased with it in different ways. Throughout my career, again, those people, when you're leaving, will help you in the future. They can help give you business. They can do all sorts of things. So you need to make everyone you can feel good. And this is really your opportunity to set up a good legacy for yourself when you leave. I remember one firm I was at, it was the most powerful partner of the firm, the founder of the firm. And he said the biggest mistake that he ever made was not being nicer to people early in his career. And he counted his career as for the first day of law school, meaning he should have been nicer and bonded with people and done everything he could to be nice to people, because that would have actually enabled him to be much more successful in the long run. It's just because could have been potential clients. And he's basically was saying he lost business and other opportunities because of that in the past. So the next question is, how long should I endure the unemotional goodbyes? And so the next step really is to determine how long of a notice you should give. And the word is should and not want. Typically, you always want to give a few weeks notice. A lot of people will quit a job and then just leave, which is not a good idea, especially in the legal profession. Other people will be in a situation where if they give notice, the law firm will suddenly just ask them to leave. But you typically want to give at least a few weeks notice. Sometimes you can say, I can stay a month or however long you want me to, and the law firm will actually want them to, but it's up to you. But at minimum, it's typically a few weeks. If your practice here is very busy or in the middle of the deals or trials, it's not really the right thing to do to quit in the middle of a trial. It's not really the right thing to do to quit in the middle of a large deal. You should try to stay at least until most of what you're doing there, where your services are really required, is over. But once it is, it's perfectly fine to leave, but you definitely want to stay as long as you need to. Sometimes an employer may want you to start in a week. They may want you to start in a few weeks. And if you need to, you always can. And especially if you're in a bad situation. But the best thing to do is employers respect it when people take longer to start. Many times they feel that you're showing a lot of respect to your previous employer, and that will probably be the same with them. So it's not something necessarily that upsets them. In most cases, your future employer will typically not have a problem with it. It's just another chance for your next employer to see that if people do want you to stay around and so forth, that you actually do good work. And it's almost like you're coming with something that's positive about you to the new employer instead of coming with a negative tin on you, and they will have a lot more faith. But it's fairly rare to give less than 2 weeks notice. You definitely want to give, in most cases, at least a few weeks notice. And typically, if you need to, you can leave in less time, especially if your firm is not busy. It's up to you. A lot of times firms will just stop giving you work and you really won't have to work too hard in your last few weeks anyway. So it's just something to think about. And you can tell the firm that it makes business sense for them to let you leave earlier and may want to do that. And sometimes they will, but it's just something to think about. Finally, there are circumstances where you may have a bad relationship with your employer, where you are worried that you may be losing your job at any day and so forth, and where the firm itself is extremely toxic and maybe going out of business, or all sorts of things are happening, or it's a branch office that could be closing, may actually be very unhealthy for you. And you may feel that no matter what you do, you're going to get bad references there from that firm. You're better off getting out of there sooner rather than later. And if that's the case, then that's something you may want to do. Sometimes also, if you're going to a position, they may be where you could potentially give them business and you could start right away. They're obviously going to be happy letting you go early. So that's another thing, especially if there's not a lot of work. The next question is when you should give notice. Typically, you want to give notice pretty quickly as soon as you have an offer from another employer, but you need to be very careful. You really do not want to give notice if the conditions of the offer haven't been met yet. So sometimes the employer that's hiring you will say, that's fine, but we need to just formally vote on it, or we need to check your references, or we need to do this or that. And if that's the case, we typically should not be giving notice yet. You need to be very careful about that. Again, I've been in a situation where I had one position where I got an offer and gave notice, and it turned out there were conflicts. And I've seen that happen quite a bit. I've seen people move cities and not be able to start a new job with conflicts. I've seen all sorts of things happen in the law firm world. Typically, until you actually have a firm offer in hand, and they've told you that conflicts are cleared and everything, then you don't want to do anything. A lot of the most prestigious law firms and the best law firms will never put an offer. They'll basically tell you what the salary is going to be, but they won't do anything in writing because that's just their policy and they want to be very careful. Frankly, that's probably smart because a lot of people do get in trouble with offers and so forth being taken and then withdrawn for whatever reason or conflict. So you just need to be very careful. Sometimes those reference checks are not as common, but the most common thing is the conflict check, and that can prevent you many times from getting offers. So you just need to make sure that happens. That can sometimes take weeks. Sometimes it could take months. You never know until you get a firm commitment from firms about that. And I've seen a lot of people, I want to say a lot, it's probably one in every, 50 offers or one in every, maybe depends on the market, but probably one in every 50 to 100 offers get withdrawn because of conflicts. And many times they ask for waivers and so forth, and the waivers aren't granted. So you just need to be very careful about that. And most firms are going to do the conflict checks. Conflict check, if you're not aware, is basically if a law firm represents one client, they can't, another law firm represents the same client. They can't, there's danger that you may have learned or information that's adverse to that client and your new employer, they won't let them hire you. But once you have all this stuff in hand, you should give notice. And if the offers haven't been met, then you need to be very careful about that. But that's really the main thing. Many times references can be an issue, but not that often. Once that everything's done, then it's easy, they're perfectly fine to leave and give notice. So it's a very short talk, I think, about giving notice. I didn't really want to spend a ton of time about it today, but the most important thing really is when you do give notice, you want to be on good terms with the firm. You typically want to do so in writing. You need to make sure you do it with the right person. You don't want to you don't want to give notice in a way that in any case makes people angry with you. Those are people that are going to be in the future and will remember you. And those are really the main things. You want to make sure that you put yourself in a position where they'll like you. A lot of law firms, actually have alumni programs and so forth for their attorneys. And so you want to do whatever you can to go out in the best way possible. And the legal community is very small. Because of that, your colleagues are going to be people that you're going to remember in the future. And any sort of negativity in terms of the way people think about you is going to hurt you in the long run. You want to make sure that you're very nice to everyone on the way out and take it kind of that way. And then, of course, make sure everyone has your forwarding information and so forth. And when you leave. So I also have a hard stop. And this is the last week of that. And then I'll be able to take a lot more questions for the following week, but I'll take as many questions as I can right now. The first question is, let's see here. What happens if you give 2 weeks notice and they ask you to leave? That's perfectly fine. And that does happen quite a bit. I think that's something that, happens, especially when the law firm's angry and so forth. But that's one reason you want to be very careful about giving notice and waiting until you have another job available. So that's something that you should be very careful about. But if they ask you to leave, that's great. I would also just say that's fine, but I would like to be paid for the next 2 weeks. And usually, but not always, they will say yes. The next question is, sorry about that, is what should I do if my law firm asks me to resign? That's a good question. So law firms will ask people to resign all the time. As a matter of fact, the law firms will basically say something to the extent of, we don't think you have a future here. We'd like you to find another position. And they'll do that for a lot of reasons. They'll do that sometimes if they're a law firm that even if you're very good at your job, they just don't have room in the partnership for you, or which it could be no fault of your own. They'll do that. If you're in a practice area where there's not a lot of work, if you're not part of a group of favorites, who knows? But there's all sorts of reasons when a law firm could ask you to resign. So if a law firm asks you to resign, there's a couple of things that I would make sure you understand. One of the first things is that if you have to resign and you don't have a job, then everyone's going to assume that you were fired or you're not committed to the practice of law, or who knows, or you're a problem and so forth. And they may ask you to resign many times because they're just trying to save money, or they're having financial issues. There could be all sorts of reasons a law firm asks you to resign, or you did something wrong. Or you're not billing enough hours, who knows? But if a law firm asks you to resign, you need to just remember that it's much, much better to find a job if you have a position open, if you have a position first. And so you have to ask yourself, how can, you make sure that you have a position when the law firm asks you to resign? And what do you need to do to be employed while you're looking for a job? And I don't know why it is in the legal profession that attorneys are expected to have jobs while they're looking for jobs, but I think it's because everyone's expected to be employed all the time. It's just not good. They wonder if most people will assume if you're not working, you've been fired or there's something wrong with you. That's a main issue, I think. If you're asked to resign, one of the next things I would say is the big thing is that you want the law firm to keep you employed many times as long as possible. That it's important for you to not be unemployed while you're looking for a job. So people will often ask, okay, I'm happy to get off the payroll in this number of weeks, but I'd like to be able to I'd like to be on the website and to have access to my email and that sort of thing, or at least my voicemail for the next few weeks, for the next several months, as long as it takes me to find a new job. And a lot of times law firms will allow that. They won't allow it obviously forever, but they will allow that. So that's an important thing to make sure that you have while you're looking for a position. And what I would do if a law firm asked you to resign. Now, if you've done something wrong and if the law firm's angry, then many times they won't give you that access to that. But that's just one thing I would say. Okay. Under what circumstances, if any, should I quit my job immediately? Okay. So there's a couple. That's a good point. I think one of the main reasons you want to quit a job immediately comes down to the fact of something illegal is going on. So if you're in a law firm and something illegal is going on and it's likely to get out, or you're being asked to participate in something illegal, then you typically do want to quit your job, or you want to bring whatever your issues are to the attention of human resources and so forth, and be asked to transfer to be taken off a matter. One of the things that happens to people in all employers, but in law firms especially, is because the work can be so stressful and because you're exposed to so many issues and problems and so forth, a lot of people will get extremely stressed while they're working in firms. And because of that, they will often believe that the firm's the problem in order to solve their mental problems or their issues and their stress or their marriages and things. They need to quit their jobs immediately. That is not always the right logic. I think that anytime you're having very serious problems, and they can be mental or emotional in nature, and they may be caused by your employer, but just without getting too far into it, you never know if it's that or something else. You're often much better off saying, I need a leave of absence, or I need some time off, or I need a vacation, or I need to go on a medical leave for some medical issues, something along those lines, and then doing that. Most law firms are not going to ask for proof that you have something wrong with you. They may, but most won't. I've never heard of one doing so. And that's something that I would recommend. I think you need to be very careful. Unless something illegal is going on, you're being asked to participate in something, you need to be very careful about leaving immediately. And the only other circumstance where you'd want to quit a job immediately is if you fear for your safety or something along those lines, or somebody is harassing you and you can't avoid them. There's all sorts of things that can happen. I had an instance where I once represented a girl. This is more than a decade ago, so it's not going to get back to anyone. And she had gone to law school. During law school, a professor actually had sexually harassed her, and he had been fired. But to her consternation, when she actually started her first job and was hired for the job, he was hired almost simultaneously, because he'd also been out in the job market after losing his professor job. And so when the day she started, she found out he was a couple of doors down from her, which was just absolutely astonishing to her. He'd been fired from the law firm school he was at. And this was a long time ago when this stuff wasn't handled the same way it is today. The law firm actually took his side. So she started her new job. It was her first job. And then within 3 or 4 weeks, she was looking for a position, and I actually got her a job, but it was so, which is very rare to get a job that quickly. That would be a circumstance where, where you fear for your safety, where you might want to resign from a job immediately. But you need to be very careful. You need to understand that once you quit a job immediately and walk off the job, they could get back to people. So the next question is, how does the law for a partner resign from a law firm? Is it any different from how an associate would resign? There's different types of partners in law firms. So there's full equity partners, and there's income partners. A lot of times an equity partner, when they resign, because there's a kind of a race for their clients and so forth, the law firm will want their clients, or other partners will want their clients. A lot of times they will just leave immediately without giving notice. It really depends on the partner. It's different when you're an associate or partner giving notice. As an income partner, most income partners won't just walk away. But if there's going to be a dispute about clients, or a lot of anger or things, sometimes partners will leave with several other partners and associates, then it can be very difficult when that sort of thing happens. Many times the partners will, when they leave the law firm, not give notice and just a short notice that they're leaving, and that's it. Okay, the next question looks like by the same person is why do partners leave law? Partners will leave law firms for a whole host of reasons. Many times they'll leave because they feel that the law firm's not providing them good enough support, which means in terms of associates. A good portion of the time they will leave because they don't have enough work, or the law firm won't accept their clients that they're trying to bring in, or is finding conflicts, or the partner's billing rate. Their clients won't pay higher billing rates. Partners will leave firms because, in most cases, because they're being forced out. Sometimes the law firm that they're working in won't like their practice area. Other times, partners will have conflicts with other partners in the firms. There's typically a lot of conflicts between partners within law firms. It depends on the law firm, but there's certainly more conflicts in some law firms than others, and they may leave for that reason. Another reason that partners will leave law firms is because they want to go to a more prestigious law firm. So many that partners will want to be in a firm that they believe is more prestigious and will allow them to bring in better clients, or just has a better name that will allow them to attract better clients. Other times partners will leave because they have a dispute with management about something or other, or someone did something to them, or they don't believe that they're getting paid enough money is another big one. Partners will have lots of disputes with firms about money, and sometimes they will leave every few years. There's all sorts of reasons that partners leave. Big thing to remember that the relationship with a partner with the law firm, the traditional relationship, is a partner will have a book of business, and say a partner has a book of business of 10 million, which is a very good book of business. In return for the law firm collecting on that partner's billables and providing secretaries and associates and all sorts of things, that the law firm is providing a service, and then the partner will get paid a certain percentage of the work that they're bringing in. Or a partner with 10 million could make anywhere from 2 million or 1.5 million. Literally, some firms pay them that little to 8 million with that much business, or even 10 million, depending on the partner's name, or even more. You just never know. But for the most part, the way the overall relationship between partners and law firms work is a partner will typically receive about 1/3 of the amount of money that they bring in to the firm, and in be compensated for that for the work that the law firm does to support the partner, like office space, associates, hiring, HR, billing, collections, finance, all the stuff that goes along with running a law firm. The law firm will take 2/3. And they typically say that it's 1/3 that goes to the overhead, and the third that goes to the pool, or whatever the profits for the firm. Who knows? But that's the general rule. And then law firms will do more or less along those lines. And so partners will leave when they feel like they're not getting a good deal in terms of that stuff. Is it okay to resign from my firm via email? Yes, you can resign and send an email giving notice. That's actually very common. People will send an email giving notice. I think it's probably better to go talk to someone in person and just say, hey, I'm giving notice, and then let HR know that you've given notice is fine. Or you can do a formal letter. But most people resign via email. But typically, you don't want to go into a lot of detail and tell people negative things. You just want to give a short notice. You would appreciate being able to stick around till this date for the next 2 weeks. But if they need you longer, you're happy to discuss it with them, something along those lines. Is there a particular time of day or day of the week when it's best to submit my resignation? Most people tend to resign on a Friday afternoon, something along those lines. It's really up to you. Friday afternoon is always good because people tend not to be as busy. They're wrapping up their week. You're not interfering with people's work, and then you're giving them the weekend to think about how to respond in terms of hiring and other things that they may be doing. And then you can leave the job if it's a 2-week notice on a Friday, and then you can start your new job 2 weeks from that, which will be when you resign from a law firm job. What are you entitled to? Well, you're typically entitled to, I don't know what that question means exactly, but you're entitled to, when you resign from a law firm job, you're typically entitled to your vacation pay in some states. So some states will allow you to accrue vacation pay. You can accrue several weeks of vacation. I don't know what the law is in your state, but whatever the state is, you can accrue several weeks of vacation pay. You can also I think that's the main stuff you're entitled to when you resign, but I don't know all the laws on that. Sorry. How do I resign without feeling guilty? That's a good question. The big thing is you shouldn't feel guilty about resigning. You're Every business and person needs to maximize their happiness and self-interest. Your happiness may be dependent on lots of things, and I don't know what makes you happy and what doesn't, but you definitely need to put yourself in a position where you're as happy as possible. And being happy means for many people different things. But you need to be happy. And you also need to put yourself in a position where you're going to be the best for your long-term career. So I would not feel guilty. I think that's great. If you do feel guilty and you're thinking about feeling guilty, but you typically want to remember that you need to do the things that are best for you in the long term. And that means many times that you may need to resign. The next question is, how do I deal with my boss after resigning? I would continue to be nice to them. Remember that your boss can provide future recommendations. The other big thing about your boss is you may want to work for them in the future. So even if you quit, you may be in a different space in the future and may want to work with them. What do you do when you quit and your boss wants you to stay? That's actually a great question. The problem is when you quit and they ask you to stay, in most cases, they're asking you to stay because they know by the time you quit that the odds are pretty good that you're going to quit again. Almost everybody that I've ever worked with that's quit a job has in the future quit again. So almost everyone that quits will quit again. So typically when they ask you to stay, all they're really trying to do is they basically want to find your replacement and they need time to do that. So they're asking you to find a replacement. Once you've made the decision to quit, you're typically going to not be able and you've given notice, that decision is what it is. And a law firm will expect you to quit again. They'll also realize that you're not committed, that if they upset you again, you're likely to quit. It's not always like that. It depends on your understanding with your employer. But for the most part, that's what happens. So if they do ask you to stay, you certainly can do things like negotiate for more money or negotiate for a title in the future and other things. But for the most part, if a law firm quit and they ask you to stay, they pretty much believe that you're going to quit, that you're going to get notice again, not stay. And that's going to be something that is going to hurt you in the future. Okay, well, thank you. As I said, I have a hard stop today. These are a lot of good questions. I have extra questions here that I haven't answered, and I will answer all those next week. I'll do an extended webinar next week to get through those questions. And I appreciate everyone being here today. And thank you very much.